Modern conflict doesn't always start with a border crossing. It starts with a glitch in a banking system, a severed data network, or a shadow operation that collapses a currency overnight. This is the new architecture of global struggle, where the most effective weapons are ledgers and packets rather than bullets. The United States has spent decades perfecting this form of control. Protected by two vast oceans, it has used its geographic isolation to build a vacuum that pulls in the top intellectual talent and the largest entrepreneurs from every other continent on Earth. This map illustrates the real anchor of that supremacy. Today, over 80% of all global trade is conducted in this single currency, the US dollar. Because most countries rely on dollars to buy oil and basic resources, the US acts as the world's financial gatekeeper. By severing a nation's connection to this hub, Washington can effectively freeze an entire economy without ever deploying a single soldier. But the institution seen here, the U.S. Department of the Treasury, is now managing a national debt that has ballooned toward $40 trillion. This massive financial weight is creating a friction point for nations tired of being subject to dollar-based sanctions. As the financial strain on the current system grows, the global order is under pressure. Rival nations are now calculating whether to stay within this dollar-centric network or build an entirely new one to break the monopoly. When financial pressure isn't enough to secure a nation's cooperation, the enforcement shifts to the CIA headquarters seen here. Their role involves identifying and influencing foreign leadership through more direct means. The process typically begins by restricting a target nation's access to IMF or World Bank loans. This triggers local inflation and job losses, which intelligence agencies then amplify to turn a country's own population against its government. Take the recent turmoil in Bangladesh. After years of public friction with Washington, Sheikh Hasina's government faced a sudden, massive surge of coordinated opposition on social media and a cutoff in international support. Her quick removal from power provides a look at how a regime can be dismantled from within when it no longer fits the global playbook. Beyond economics, there is the strategy of elite capture. Intelligence agencies often use honey traps and invasive surveillance to gain compromising leverage over a nation's top ministers and generals. This portrait of Jeffrey Epstein represents the extreme end of that leverage. His network was designed to document the actions of some of the world's most powerful figures, effectively weaponizing their personal lives for long-term geopolitical control. Under this framework, conquering a nation's territory is unnecessary. If you control the secrets of the people at the top, the country is already effectively under your command. Washington is now facing a difficult choice: either default on its $40 trillion in debt or find a way to pay it back using a new kind of asset. This diagram illustrates a theory where the U.S. uses digital assets to solve its debt crisis. By stockpiling massive amounts of cryptocurrency, the government could create a new pool of value to offset its traditional liabilities. The strategy would involve driving up the value of these digital tokens and using them to settle debts with foreign creditors. Once the debt is cleared from the American books, a change in regulations could crash the market, leaving those foreign nations holding empty digital wallets. The ultimate goal is to rewrite the global ledger entirely, allowing a superpower to erase its own debt without losing its influence over the world economy. But the rivals are watching. While American strategy is often loud and visible, China operates on a philosophy of strict silence, deploying an expansion strategy known as the string of pearls. Beijing's approach relies on infrastructure rather than ideology. They fund massive development projects in developing nations, knowing full well these countries will never generate enough revenue to pay the loans back. When the nation inevitably defaults, China collects the collateral. That's what happened here at the Hambantota port in Sri Lanka, where a defaulted loan allowed Beijing to secure a 99-year lease on a strategic physical asset. China applies this same calculated patience to its military. Beijing is waiting for the U.S. to exhaust its air defense systems and financial resources in Middle Eastern proxy wars before making a decisive move on Taiwan. To bypass the dollar entirely, the BRICS nations are returning to physical standards. By pooling massive gold reserves like these, they are building an alternative currency designed to facilitate trade without ever touching a U.S. bank. The challengers have realized that fighting the American military directly isn't the goal. Instead, they are dismantling the economic infrastructure that pays for those weapons in the first place. In the middle of this standoff sits India. Geographically, it is surrounded by instability, a historically hostile Pakistan on one side and a newly volatile Bangladesh on the other. Facing this encirclement, India has adopted a strategy of strict neutrality. Rather than joining loud international alliances, New Delhi is focusing inward on its own economic growth. But this silence is a calculated tactic. It allows India to maintain its focus while executing complex, long-term intelligence operations without drawing the immediate wrath of competing superpowers. Look at the integration of Sikkim in the 1970s. Through the patient funding of local groups and media, Indian operatives systematically turned the population against their ruler and exposed foreign agents. The territory was integrated into its borders before the world even realized the shift had occurred. In a chaotic world, the loudest superpower isn't necessarily the most effective. Strategic patience, backed by a growing economy, has become a formidable weapon of its own. The era where one single capital dictated the rules for the entire planet is now permanently fracturing into pieces. A nation's power is now measured by its grip on rare earth minerals and its ability to manufacture the digital infrastructure the rest of the world relies on. This chart shows the result of that shift. Nations are actively pulling capital out of U.S. Treasury bonds to protect themselves. Simultaneously, we see a sharply rising trendline in trade conducted outside the dollar system through new regional alliances. This invisible war forces a choice on every nation. They can either remain subject to the economic gravity of the old world or join the challengers to rewrite the rules of global power.